And kick off this episode of Bride of Monster Kid Radio with the song The Arouser. It's from the band The Arousals, and it's off their new album For the Daring and Lusty. You can find them over at thearousals.bandcamp.com. They're a Belgium surf band, and they're awesome. Not just because they gave us permission to play their music here on the podcast devoted to the classic and sometimes not so classic genre cinema of yesteryear. Big thanks to the band. My name is Derek M. Cook, the writer, host, and producer of the podcast, and you are a podcast listener of exquisite taste. Thank you for tuning in and checking out this episode of the show. What do I have cooked up for you this week? Well, a couple of my original recording plans fell through. Not completely, we just had to reschedule some things, which left me with a big ol' hole in the recording and broadcast schedule. Well, there's somebody who's not been on my podcast in a very, very long time. A Monster Kid Radio Irregular going all the way back to the very beginning of the podcast. I'm talking about author Stephen D. Sullivan. And it's been quite some time since we've even chatted, not necessarily in person, but actually had a conversation. And I thought, you know what, let's just get Steve on the show and play a little bit of catch-up. And it just so happens he's starting to auction off some awesome comic book collectible comics from his youth. He's going to tell us about that, and he's going to tell us about what he's been up to in the past year-ish or so since he's been on any of these podcasts here over at monsterkidradio.net. This is a pretty freestyle conversation. Did we really have a topic to talk about? No, not really. Although we did kind of land on one or two kind of along the way. We definitely didn't have a film in mind. Like I said, this was kind of a last-minute fill-in. But I know Steve, I trust Steve, I love Steve, and I knew that he and I could come up with a halfway listenable conversation. You'll have to be the judge of that when you hear that after you hear Mark Matzke's Beta Capsule review. You see, unlike the bulk of this week's episode, Mark puts tons of thought and work into every single installment of the Beta Capsule review, and he's going through every single episode of the Ultraman franchise. And right now, we're still talking about Ultraman Ace. So we've got that coming up. Then we've got Steve and I playing catch-up, and that's all coming up right after this.
From the spine-chilling world of the living dead comes a never-to-be-forgotten combination of motion picture thrills.
Two great new terror hits on one sensational program at your movie theater. Horror of Dracula, plus The Thing That Couldn't Die. Horror of Dracula. Dracula, the terrifying lover who lusts for human blood.
Dracula, the human vampire who rises each night from his coffin bed to seek the rendezvous that alone can keep him alive.
Who will be the bride of Dracula tonight? Horror of Dracula. All new and in flaming Technicolor.
Plus this second thrill hit,
The Thing That Couldn't Die.
What is it, this head that lives without a body?
A monstrous thing that enslaves every woman, destroys every man who stares into its eyes.
See both on the same show.
Horror of Dracula
and The Thing That Couldn't Die.
Hey, weirdos. Bring a fiend to a night of terror. But wait until the dead of night. And from behind the tombstone, maybe you will see
the man and monster.
And he is usually with
the bloody vampire.
It's time for terror. If you see them, you will see an unspeakable horror that terrorizes the universe. You and your fiend can make it a foursome when you meet
the man and monster and the bloody vampire.
Have something to share with Bride of Monster Kid Radio? You can email the show at monsterkidradio@gmail.com, or you can call and leave a voicemail at 360-524-2484.
Live from the Land of Light in Nebula M78, home of the mighty Ultra Heroes, it's Monster Kid Radio's Beta Capsule Review. Ultraman Ace, Episode 37, Star of Friendship Forever. Hokuto briefly visits with an old friend, Kashima, who's the chief of a high-speed automobile project, before he's called away by Tak. Terrible monster Machlis has appeared, destroying both a bullet train and a jumbo jet. Machlis is undeterred by Tak's lasers and missiles, and after exchanging fire, the monster burrows underground. Tak determines that Machlis is heading towards Kashima's research lab, while Hokuto learns that his friend's ambition to build the world's fastest car is making him selfish and distrustful. Machlis surfaces at the test track, threatening Kashima's life's work, including the blueprints of his prototype vehicle. What will Kashima be willing to sacrifice to keep his dream alive? Episode 37, Star of Friendship Forever, made its broadcast debut on December 15, 1972. After a string of episodes that focused on children, Episode 37 takes things in a more mature direction, and the result is an engaging tale that's both heartwarming and jam-packed with monster action. Star of Friendship Forever has a couple of thoughtful themes to explore, the most obvious being the pitfalls of ambition and success. But the opening narration also questions the limits of humanity's so-called need for speed. Machlis is a pretty good kaiju design, and the special effects, while blatantly artificial in a few quick shots, are occasionally exceptionally impressive, enhancing a longer than usual closing fight sequence to the delight of fans both young and old of Ultraman Ace. For Monster Kid Radio's Beta Capsule Review, this is Mark Matzke reporting.
Soon, this June, it's the Monster Bash Conference at the Pittsburgh Marriott North in Cranberry Township. Fans of classic horror and science fiction films and TV will gather from across the United States and beyond. It's where you can meet and get autographs from movie and TV actors and actresses. This June 20th through the 22nd, 2025, meet Catherine Lee Scott and Sharon Smythe from the original Dark Shadows TV show, plus writer and zombie from the original Night of the Living Dead, John Russo, and the kids and grandkids of the original Universal Monsters, Frankenstein, creature from the Black Lagoon, Dracula, the Wolfman, and the Mummy, Ron Chaney, Lynn Lugosi, Renee Browning. Also appearing, the Monsters movie grandpa Daniel Roebuck, TV horror host Son of Ghoul, an Ohio TV legend, and horror host Mr. Lobo. Renegade monster movie director David The Rock Nelson will be filming on site as well. You'll love shopping over 100 vendor tables featuring movie collectibles, DVDs, Blu-rays, vintage toys, vinyl records, monster magazines, comic books, and more to boggle your eyes. Rare film screenings, special talks, and live game shows where you can win great prizes. It's all part of Monster Bash at the Pittsburgh Marriott North, June 20th through the 22nd, 2025. For discounted advance admission, go to the website monsterbash.us. That's monsterbash.us. Or call 724-238-4317 for more information.
We love the Monster Bash. Woo!
Hey man, dig this Ryogan show for a crazy thriller. It's Monsters A Go-Go. A horror thriller with the go-go beat, live on stage from Hollywood. See the Teenage Frankenstein. See Help! I need somebody help! The Beatles mystically transformed. See Hollywood's golden go-go girl, Pat Collins. See the ethereal materialization of 007 as James Bond. It's the kookiest and the spookiest. It's where the action is. See Monsters A Go-Go. Terror walks off the stage and into the audience. Free 2-for-1 pass to anyone who can sit through the entire show, and it's all live. This is the only show that gets away with murder. So come early and get a seat. If you're late, we may put you in a coffin. See Monsters A Go-Go. Monsters A Go-Go. Monsters A Go-Go. Monsters A Go-Go.
But the room was quiet. Had it been a nightmare? What woke him? Was the candle in the antique mirror moving? Was there something standing by the curtains? Was he mad?
The Crimson Cult. So terrifying they won't let us tell you about it here.
She'd wandered alone. The passageway between the walls was damp and musty. She dropped her candle. And then I heard it. Now she has no head. It happened in Horror House. I was there.
A nightmare combination of shock and terror, and you're invited behind forbidden doors. Horror House stars Frankie Avalon and Jill Hayworth. The Crimson Cult features Boris Karloff and Christopher Lee. See them together for the first time, but don't see them alone. Rated GP.
Oh, today's Christopher R. Mims' birthday.
It is.
It's his birthday. So let's talk about Chris a little bit.
Yeah,
let's talk about Chris. Ladies and gentlemen, first of all, before we get into talking to Chris, we're talking about Chris. We're not actually talking to Chris. It'd be kind of funny if we just called him right now. And can we do that? Do we have the technology?
I don't know. I mean, I could try to call him on my cell phone.
Let's get everybody Chris's home phone number, and then you'll just call Chris at your...
I don't know if we could get him into the call so people could hear him really well.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. But let's talk about Chris with Stephen D. Sullivan returning to the pod waves after a very long time here. A old school Monster Kid Radio Irregular. And when I pulled up Skype, it told me that the last time we chatted was about a year ago. Now, you and I talk on Facebook Messenger all the time, but has it been that long since you've been on the podcast?
Yeah. Yeah, I think it has. It seems like ages. I haven't been on since you changed the name of it and moved and all that kind of stuff.
Sure. I'm just wondering if there's a reason for that I'm going to regret having you back on now? Like, did I make the decision?
Well, it could be. It's I have drunk the Hyde serum since the last time we talked, and yeah.
Look, I do want to talk about Chris, actually, but let's talk to you and see what you're up to, man. How things been going?
What am I up to? I am up to recovering from surgery to remove a cyst from my ankle that made my ankle look like a golf ball.
Awesome.
And so I'm doing that. And before I was doing that, I was discovering what I could do about my ankle being the size of a golf ball for a while. And before that, I was taking all the comics I co-own with my brother Mark out of a safe deposit box and getting them to Heritage Auctions for an auction that has just started now. Depending on when this airs, there's an auction going on for my Silver Age Marvel comics, including Spider-Man 1, Daredevil 1, and all sorts of other things. There's about 3 or 4 weeks worth of auction stuff, not all in big lots, some in smaller lots. that's going on right now. So I was prepping for that. And before that, I was, I guess I wrote my Cushing and my Frost Harrow annual free stories for Halloween and Christmas. And somewhere in there, my daughter got married to her fiance, and she and her wife are now living happily together. And before that, my mom died, which totally screwed up most of my last year. I've been busy.
Why are we laughing about that last thing you just said? That's not funny. I'm sorry.
No, it's not funny. It's sad, but it's, it's 6 months gone now. And it's just, I was laughing because, when someone says to you, what have you been doing lately? And you're a writer like I am, usually you want to respond with, oh yeah, I was working on this project. I was working on this project. I got this published. I got this published. My life has been so full of stuff that I have not done a lot of what we would usually talk about. So I did mention the Cushing story and the Frost story, of which I think turned out really, really well. I'm very proud of both of those. And I also put together a number of games for GaryCon, which is, I forgot to even mention GaryCon. GaryCon was in there too. So I put together some games for GaryCon based on the Bookmark No Hit Point gaming system, which is a gaming system that fits on a bookmark, believe it or not, which I love. So I was doing that for GaryCon and also for the upcoming EggCon. Egg is EGG for E. Gary Gygax, and it's run by Heidi Gygax and her husband, Eric Garland. Actually, they're both Gygax Garland, I think, or the other way around. Garland Gygax? Gygax Garland, I think. Anyway, she and her husband run this convention in the same way that Luke Gygax, Gary's son, Gary's eldest surviving son, runs GaryCon. So, and I forgot to admit, I'm laughing just because it's either laugh or cry, right? But my old friend, who I'd known for, more than 40 years, Ernie Gygax, also passed away during this time too. So there was some stuff going on with Ernie and the family and his memorial at the convention and get together. And anyway, life has been full of life.
I think most listeners probably know, but for those of you who don't know, Gary Gygax, or E. Gary Gygax, was the co-creator of Dungeons and Dragons, and we wouldn't have the role-playing game industry that we have today if not for his work, as well as a bunch of the other pioneers at the beginning of what D&D was, like Dave Arneson and all those. And GaryCon, which Monster Kid Radio has done some work with in the past, doing like a remote stream movie festival sort of thing, is all about celebrating what Gary brought to the table. And I've never heard of EggCon. That sounds cool too. I would love to get to one of these things.
Yeah, EggCon is just in the second year.
Okay.
And it's in July, and I don't remember the exact dates, but if you go to Facebook or you go online, look up EggCon, it should come right up. And it's kind of an old school gaming convention. GaryCon has gotten so huge that it's literally hard to find people there anymore. I mean, when it started after Gary died. Now, those of you that don't know or who come in late, I worked at TSR starting in 1980, and which is fairly early in the history of D&D. Worked on D&D and all their other products, and then have freelanced off and on ever since on such things. So I have a long history of that. I worked with Gary on a couple of projects that got torpedoed by anti-competition lawsuits personally. So all the people involved in early D&D, I know most of them and I'm friends with most of them, including the entire Gygax family. So they're all the Gygax kids who are mostly my age are kind of like cousins to me in some ways. They're people that have been in my life a long time, and we've shared a lot of this stuff. So anyway, so when they do something like a convention, I go do, even though I'm not, I'm kind of a hermit, you know that, and I don't get out much. I don't socialize. I don't do a lot of conventions. Probably bad for my career in some sense of getting wider known and that kind of stuff. But I'm friendly, I'm talkative, and that stuff. I just don't go hang out a lot. Oh, we also have been playing. We've been playing games. My wife, when I say we, I say my wife and I. She's been a gamer almost as long as I have, and we've been playing games every Thursday night, pretty much with a small group of friends online, which has been great. Many of whom used to work for DSR. So, yeah. So, did I explain all of that fairly adequately at this point?
No, that sounds great. And, the GaryCon experience, I know that you've been keeping the classic and not so classic monster movie presence alive there because you've run a Mono Sans a Pit game at one point, didn't you?
Yeah. I ran Monos for years, and I didn't run it this year, though I have. There's a woman that I've become friends with who's an entertainment lawyer, actually, who really would like to take over running Monos for me. So she and I were talking about that. And so she may continue the tradition of running the Monos games. So that's pretty exciting. Yeah. And at GaryCon this year, I ran a game based dinosaurs and cowboys game, dinosaurs and army men game. You may notice a theme there. And then I ran a game based on a very popular modern Gothic soap opera that I don't have a license for, but it's an unofficial Dark Shadows game.
Okay, wait. Modern? Did you just call Dark Shadows modern?
Well, it was when I grew up.
Oh, okay.
Hey, man, you look in David's room, there's a major Matt Mason playset in one corner. It's the most modern thing in that entire show. I had that toy. So I'm kind of looking into whether I can actually license that because I'd love to, and that would be fun. And it went really well.
Who owns the rights to Dark Shadows these days? Do we know?
It's the Dan Curtis people still.
Really?
Yeah. Yay! Yay, tree or something things. Yay.
Oh, that's wonderful. I mean, I know he's no longer with us, but if his estate or his family is involved still, it hasn't been taken over by somebody.
I believe so. I'm networking with people we know to try to kind of figure that out and figure out if there's an easy way to do that. I know it's not going to be probably as easy as working with Paul Nash's estate, I still have my Paul Nashi werewolf book coming out. The things got delayed by life this year, and among them are the Paul Nashi werewolf book. And they're very easy to work with. And I doubt that the Curtis people will be that easy, but maybe I'll be surprised and we'll be able to get this out and get it done relatively cheaply, and people will be able to play it at some point beyond finding me at a convention and pressuring me into doing it.
Yeah, I knew an entertainment lawyer who might be able to help you figure out who owns the rights.
I do. I'm not sure if that's exactly the right way to the kind of thing that she can help with, but it may be, and we're gonna have dinner with her sometime next month, and I don't know if it's gonna be just a friendship dinner or if we're actually gonna talk business. But yeah, I also hoping to get some help from her to discover whether I need to rewrite the first Frost Harrow book because I used too much of a certain song lyric in the book. And I know that can be a very tricky
music is weird.
So we'll see. Anyway, as I was saying, I'm not sure how tricky Dan Curtis will be. The Dan Curtis people will be to work with to maybe get a license to do just a very simple role-playing game, which I'm relatively sure. Well, I know I can do it, and I know that I can license the underlying system very cheaply. And if we could get a good deal together, should be able to put out a really entertaining, simple to run Dark Shadows game. If I'm really lucky, they might be as easy to deal with as the Paul Nashi estate. Nashi's sons have been on the werewolf book, which I was saying is one of the things that got delayed this last year because life because of all this other stuff that's gone on in my life. And kind of cross your fingers and hope, if there's a huge demand for a Dark Shadows role-playing game, make sure it's a demand for me doing it.
Yeah.
So it doesn't end up being someone like Hasbro. But
How would that work? I wonder with Dark Shadows, part of the reason it's so awesome is the characters.
right.
So do you create new characters or do you take on the role of existing characters? Or is this something you don't want to say out loud because you don't want somebody to take your idea?
I will say I've thought about it both ways, and I think it can run both ways.
Okay.
I don't think I'll tell you, although people probably look it up, what way I did it. But it seemed to work really, really well. And part of my idea for doing these kind of things is to not reinvent the wheel the way a lot of people do with, new role-playing game, new system, has to be blah, 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 blah. I am of the opinion that simple systems are best. When I worked on D&D, we worked on the basic and expert set. One of the things that we were doing on that was trying to make the game simple enough that people could play it quickly and easily without learning, all the AD&D rules and that kind of stuff. And we could have gone further with that had we not been under legal constraints in what we could do and what we could use in order to do D&D in such a way that it was all part of the D&D, AD&D split. And they were, the Gygax and Artisan camps were opposing each other and trying to, trying to make sure who got royalties for what and that kind of stuff. And so we had elements we had to work under in order to keep the system enough the same that AD&D and D&D were separate. Is the upshot of that. And I can go into that further, but this is a monster podcast, not a D&D podcast. So you're far more interested in Barnabas and Quentin and Paul Nash's werewolf than you are in D&D's monster manual or other things like that. Probably, I hope. Maybe.
Well, I just want to say this regarding the gaming side of things. I ask about the Dark Shadows and how players would interact with the game, because I do remember there was a version of an Indiana Jones role-playing game at one point where all the characters were basically Indiana Jones' sidekicks. And that just doesn't sound fun.
That was the TSR one, was it?
I don't remember. I really don't remember.
We did one at TSR when I was there that Zeb Cook designed, if memory serves. And I was in the art department at the time. I'd moved from editorial to art department. And the thing that everyone remembers most about that was that it had little stand-up figures with it. And the stand-up figures all had little TMs next to their names. And as a result, we got Nazi TM. and which in theory made Nazi a trademark of Lucasfilm, etc., because they wanted us to trademark everything, and they were like, we didn't mean that, and they were like, and TSR was like, well, that's what you said, and so there's Nazi is in theory a trademark of old TSR or Lucasfilm or both of them. Because
I would love for there still to be an existing trademark that then Disney at this point, since they own it all, seems to start going after so-called Nazi.
Oh yeah, that's true. In theory, if it's a trademark, it has to be used as an adjective, so it would have to be Nazi TM bad guys or something like that. Yeah, I have stories.
That's awesome. That's awesome. So, as a monster kid, then, when life gets in the way, when we've got all these things happening, and we've dealt with, over the course of this podcast's history, a lot of changes in the world. We had COVID, we had the pandemic, and then everything else as well.
Right, you traveled across the world to the other side of the world and did all sorts of things.
As a monster kid, how do you keep your inner monster kid alive when all this is happening? What do you
watch a lot of movies?
Watch a lot of movies. That's kind of where
I'll still watch a lot of movies. I did not mention that every month I'm still putting up, mini reviews of all the movies and major TV shows I watch. So if I finish a season of something that's in genre or related to the genre, I'll review the whole season. But otherwise, it's a lot of mostly movies, seasons of shows, occasionally interesting shorts. And despite everything that went on last year, I posted over 600 reviews of mostly different things. Now, there does get to be a point where, as Monster Kids, we have our chicken soup for the soul, and we'll return to certain movies, certain creators over and over again. And for me, obviously, that is things like Universal Horror, Hammer Horror, Dark Shadows, Ray Harryhausen.
In that order?
No, not necessarily in that order. It's all kind of a melange. It depends upon what kind of a mood I'm in. Okay. Harryhausen birthday is coming up again at the end of June, so there will always be Harryhausen then. And whenever I kind of run across his stuff somewhere, I'll watch it. I only count things I see from beginning to end, though. So sometimes it'll be like, oh, look, I missed the first 20 minutes of Beast. Beast from 20,000 Fathoms, and then I'll go, oh yeah, well, I'll pull that up online and I'll watch it out of my massive and growing larger all the time collection of online movies to go with my massive and not growing nearly as much physical media DVDs and Blu-rays. So that's a recharge too. And it helps. In some ways, it's helped that there are long-term projects that I've started that have kept running while I haven't had much time to work on new stuff. So, for instance, Atomic Tales, which is obviously Atomic Tales Strange Invaders, which is in theory the first of 2 Atomic Tales series, that actually finished up in March. March? Yeah, just last month. After running for 4 years. 48 episodes, and you played some of those on Monster Kid Radio, and you know that there were standalone episodes generally, though the last parts do continue into each other from like 45 or 6 to 48. So that kept running because I'd actually finished that before all this nonsense started in my life.
What is Atomic Tales for people who don't know?
Atomic Tales is a 1950s sci-fi horror serial. Done in the style of the giant bug movies from the 1950s that we all love. So it's very, very much inspired by them and Tarantula, the Deadly Madness, and those kind of things, plus UFOs and invaders from outer space stuff. So we've got a guy that turns into a man-sect. We've got a 50-foot tall woman. We've got we've got strange UFO encounters. We've got all that kind of stuff. And every episode is a complete short story. And thanks to birthday boy Christopher R. Mim, every story is also a complete full cast audio reading of the story. And Chris and I started doing that together about 4 years ago. And he's one of the main narrators. The other 2 main narrators are his wife, Stephanie, who also was dealing with health issues because she got T-boned in an unexpected car crash on the way home from work, and is still recovering from that. Still, she's my ankle hurt buddy. Yeah. She had a very badly broken ankle that they had to pin back together. Anyway, Chris and Stephanie, and then the really wonderful actress Rachel Grubb, who has been in a number of Mimiverse movies and a number of other movies, was the 3rd main narrator. So every episode there's a narrator, and then there's a supporting cast, and Chris adds in sound effects and some music and all that kind of stuff. And they're just fabulous, and they turned out great end to end. Very, very happy with it. And at the end, both Chris and I are exhausted enough that we're taking a couple of months off, and then hopefully we'll go back in with a new Atomic Tales or a new something, probably Atomic Tales, I think, because I had a second arc I wanted to finish. Anyway, so it's a sci-fi monster movie stuff, and you played some of them and you enjoyed them, I assume.
Yeah, and Beth was on one, so
right. Yes, and Beth was on one.
Yeah,
and so you were on one.
Was I?
Yeah.
Oh, I don't remember.
Episode 4. You were Lieutenant Koch, or except it was pronounced Coke, and we actually played that up in the episode. You don't even remember.
I don't remember. This my voice all over the internet. I don't remember.
Right, and I played a couple of different characters. I started out playing one and then had to fill in another one because we kept losing actors from the other one. And I thought, well, as the creator, I'm just going to take that character, and it's not going to be as good as if we'd found someone better at it than me. But yeah, and so there's full cast, and the last episodes with 12, 14 actors or something like that, and that each one of them is just and speaking of Dark Shadows, Penny Dreadful from Dark Shadows, Daniel Gerlerter. I hope I pronounced her last name right. I never get to say it.
You'll notice that I only referred to her as Penny Dreadful in the episode that she was on because I was afraid I'd mispronounce the last name myself.
Right. Chris does it every episode she's in. Gets it right in the credits, and I'm like, all I have to do is remember what he says and do it. Anyway,
I'm sure I would get it right, but I'm just editing time.
It's one of those. It's a name that's easier to read than it is to say. Anyway, Danielle / Penny is a recurring character too, so she was in a whole bunch of them. It was just delightful woman to work with, and she does, if you all have not seen her Dark Shadows podcast, Terror at Collinwood, am I remembering that right? If you haven't seen it, it is amazing. That's one of the things that's actually kept my monster kid going through all of this, is being able to just tune out and tune in. And I'm a big fan of Dark Shadows, that. The words Dark Shadows appear in almost every book I've ever published, even under pseudonyms. Right? I just find a way to sneak it in there somewhere. But to listen to her and to like John Logan, who created the Penny Dreadful show, not her horror host persona, but the actual show that ran on Showtime, I think it was, which was a great series. Hearing her and people like John Logan and other people that are really, really super fans of the show talk about just every aspect of Dark Shadows, whether it's who had the best character deaths versus how many people did this character play versus that character in the series versus the guy that actually built an entire house to resemble the Collinwood Manor from the show. That was just amazing. Amazing.
And say Penny, by the way, Penny also does a lot of acting. Later this year, end of October through mid-November, she is joining a stage production of The Addams Family.
Oh, cool.
She's playing Grandma.
Okay, I'm old now. I'm really, really old.
Grandma. This is happening at the Falmouth Theater Guild, which is in Falmouth. I'm probably mispronouncing that. Speaking of
it's Falmouth. Falmouth. I grew up near Falmouth. It's Falmouth, Massachusetts.
Yes, Falmouth,
but it's Falmouth.
All right, fair enough. Yeah, she posted something about that like the beginning of April. And she was kind of coy about it. It's like, I'm joining the cast, whatever. But then you go look at the graphic and she's listed as Grandma, which is super cool. I wish I could see it. I hope it gets recorded somehow.
I totally missed that was going on. Yeah, anyway, she's brilliant at Dark Shadows. And the weird thing is, she and I grew up in almost the same area, and her just a little later than me. She even went to the same college I went to, which is called something different now than it was when I went there. But she and I went to the same college. We know it's like all the same spots are common to us. And somehow it took many years and your show or something for us to actually meet up and become friends and do stuff together. Anyway, she's been terrific, and she's one of the things that's kept my monster kid going. Whenever I need a dose of monster, I can find out stuff I never knew about Dark Shadows, listening to people that I may be a big fan and may be able to create a role-playing game and that kind of stuff. And I'm still annoyed that I didn't get to write the comic book series when one of my friends did one of the first comic book series in Dark Shadows. But the amount of knowledge that she and the people she has on her show have about the series is so much greater than mine. But I'm still the one to do the role-playing game. Trust me. But you mentioned a play, and I totally forgot to mention that in the midst of all that.
Yeah. See, this is the guy who told you a second ago. A second ago, you're all like, well, I'm a hermit. I don't get out and do anything. Dude.
I had the first ever stage reading of my one of my plays, which my friend Paul McConis and I put together a book of short science fiction, fantasy, and horror plays, and we finally, after many years, found a spot down in Chicago that wanted to do them, and we had a reading in December, like a week after my daughter got married, and on June 13th. Friday, June 13th this year, they will be doing a full performance of the thing. So, yeah, I've had some stuff going. I just haven't. I had all these books I wanted to get out by the end of last year, and none of them came out. But somehow life happened.
Like you said, life gets in the way. I mean, I had a moment, and I think I expressed this to you and obviously Beth, and I think one other person, and I didn't express it to hardly anybody else. At the beginning of this year, I was really frustrated with my job situation, really frustrated. And I had just gotten to a point to where I was just like, I'm done. I can't do this long-term anymore. I'm not going to quit my job, but I'm going to double down. I know I keep talking about it. I'm going to double down. I'm going to write. And by the end of next year, 2026, I will have published enough to where I don't have to work anymore. And I had grand plans. And in my case, it's a lot different than yours. I didn't have deaths. Well, I suppose my job that I disliked tremendously died in that I left them. And they can't do anything about it.
Which is a great decision. And boy, am I so glad that all that worked out.
They can't do anything about it now. So I don't mind saying this out loud. I kind of took advantage of that company. Because the way they did their time off, it wasn't like their personal time off was not something they divvied out over the year, accrued per paycheck. It was, you get 120 hours at the beginning of the year. You're responsible to use it all up the way you're going to use it all up. When I realized I would be leaving them to go to my current job, oh, I'm sick. Oh, I'm out of town. I can't come into work. And I used all but 40 of my hours.
Well, and you should do that. I mean, that's the rules they set out. You're not making their rules. You're just playing by. No. And if they're not smart enough to figure that out on their own, I don't have a lot of sympathy for big companies.
Well, and I walked out on a Friday and started training at my new job on Monday. So
right.
And for those of you who don't know, I now work for the Lego Group. I'm part of their
which I assume is still going awesome.
Consumer and shopper engagement team. So if you ever call
servicey thing, and
if you ever call them with a problem or email them with a problem, you might get me. So
which is cool.
And I've been doing that for a little over 2 months now, and it's been incredible, and I'm having a grand time. I love the company, and unfortunately, it means my writing hasn't happened. Everything kind of came to a screeching halt, and I haven't done anything. I get a version of analysis paralysis where I have so many different things in front of me in terms of things that I want to do. It's hard for me to focus on one and see it to completion.
Oh yeah, no, I hear that too. I have that same problem sometimes too, especially lately.
Yeah. So I've got, this Mark Temple short novel that I want to do. I have this audio drama thing that I want to get off the ground with Beth. Putting inspired because I could see that it could be done thanks to Steve and Chris and their crew. So I've got that I want to do. And I still need to write something about what happened in Kuwait when we went over there for the haunted house experience before too much time passes and I start forgetting things.
Right.
Or misremembering things. And I've been struggling with that, but I am going to get back on track with that and kind of rebrand my social media stuff when it comes to the writing. I think Monster Kid Writer is on its way out. Just because it never really went anywhere the way I wanted it to, which is fine by my own design, my own fault. But we're going to get Death Rider going, to kind of go along with Team Band. So we'll get Death Rider going. So we'll go from there.
It's always a question whether to expand a brand or rebrand, and I mean, I was like, oh man, they're leaving Monster Kid Radio behind. That's like starting with a new number one.
I've said this before. I consider this is season 2 of the podcast. It's just first season ran 11 years. That's all.
And hey, here I am.
Yeah,
I'm back.
Yeah. And, I didn't change the website. The URL is still the same.
Yeah, we could do this with you whenever we can find time. I love doing. Chatting with you is terrific. Chatting with you and sharing it with friends.
Yeah.
Even more. Now that I've forgotten to tell you about my play and stuff, part of me is like, well, what else am I forgetting to tell you? I think people have said in the past to me occasionally that my standards for myself are impossibly high. But that's probably how I get quite a bit of stuff done a lot of the time. So, there is always stuff brewing, and there's still, like I said, there are 4 out of 6 Frost Arrow books, the werewolf book. Oh, and I forgot to mention the Monster Shark on a Nude Beach, which may get a rebranding if it needs to sell it publicly, was on Vella and did pretty well for me. And Vella was Kindle's serial form that was annoyingly, at least initially, not available on Kindle, only on your phone, and wasn't available outside of the US. And I did a mega novel about sharks eating people, and heroes and villains and all that kind of cool stuff. And that was up on their platform, Vella platform, and the Vella platform closed down like a month or 2 ago. They just shut it down. So that was available for everyone, and now it's not available for anyone. Although I guess if you bought it, maybe you could still read it somehow on their platform, or I don't even know. I was so annoyed that they were doing this. So that's another thing that I need to figure out how to actually bring back out. Have to get that into print publication and probably Kindle ebook and that kind of stuff, and get it into a more permanent form. So, but it's very disappointing because it wasn't a lot of money, but it was sometimes I had a couple of really good months for that. And as
you still own the rights to all that, though. Yes. Vella was just distribution. They didn't own anything else. So
right. Yep. Yeah. No, they weren't buying anything. I mean, that's one of the reasons people say. I know that Amazon's getting a lot of kind of bad guff now,
and rightly so.
That's ever done with them. I own. They don't own any of it, and that makes them better with almost nearly every publisher I've ever worked with. I mean, they're not a publisher; they're a distributor. But yeah, so I've got to get that back together and get that out. Find new homes for my lost children, because the Frost Hour stuff was all up on an original online back before ebooks were popular. It was all on a site called fatbrain.com, which was an online e-publishing site that Derek's raising his eyebrows here. It's like, no idea. I never heard of this. Yeah, no, it was around before there were actual good e-readers, that kind of stuff. So, and that's, what year is 25 years ago? So sometimes it's hard to get things back into print once they go out, even if you own them. But my hope had been to get a lot of it out by the end of last year, and now my hope is to get a lot of it out by the end of this year. And knock wood, I'm not going to have any more weird health things or weird other family things. But I am what they generally call retirement age. I feel like I'm still the 21-year-old that started at TSR, but that was 44 years ago, almost 45. And so life, getting old is not for the faint hearted, as they say.
Have I told the story about my coworker here on the show who made me feel incredibly old during training?
No, I don't think so. At least I don't remember. I've listened to all the shows, I think, except maybe last week's, and I don't remember it.
I have a coworker who's becoming a friend. He and I are friends. He and his wife have met me and Beth for coffee. He's interested in playing Dungeons and Dragons. He loves Lego. He loves comic books. He loves superhero movies. He's a good dude. I'm not going to say his name, but he's become a friend. He also used to live in the Portland area. And so we have met up for coffee and kind of lamented the fact that Arizona doesn't know how to do good coffee and this sort of thing. Well, during training, we're in groups of trainees, I suppose, and the group of us are listening to one person take a call, and we're kind of going round robin and that sort of thing. And at Lego, we are encouraged to, personalize things, be friendly with the customers, that sort of thing. And he gets a call from a dad who is missing a piece or something about a Spider-Man set. And he starts talking to my coworker about how much he and his son love the superhero movies, and they are looking forward to all the superhero movie sets and all of that. And my coworker says, "Yeah, I really love those movies too. In fact, my first movie memory is seeing the Tobey Maguire Spider-Man." Dude. Dude. I mean,
well, that at least it's not one of the more recent ones.
Yeah, that's what Beth keeps saying. At least it wasn't Tom Holland. It's like Spot or Andrew Garfield. Like, dude, my first Spider-Man on screen was Nicholas Hammond. Get out of here.
Right, yeah, there you go. Who was, aside from the animation, who was the first Spider-Man on screen?
Right, and
at least in the US, though maybe the Japanese crazy one was earlier. Now that I think of it.
No, Nicholas Hammond was first.
Was he?
Although Nicholas Hammond did appear theatrically because they took a couple of the episodes and released them as films overseas in Japan. Yeah, so my coworker and I kind of tease each other now about how I'm the oldest man in the class, and he's just I brought up videotapes the other day, and I kind of went off a little bit about, you see, back in the day, they put movies out on magnetic tape, and there were stores you could go to and rent them.
Right. Well, my wife is one of the oldest people at the library. She's working with people that are our kids' age, right? Yeah. And occasionally something will come up that'll just show that, right? It's easier for her though, because she still has all her hair and doesn't have to dye any of it. Stuff. So people think she's younger than she is anyway. Yeah. Whereas, I'm one of those, that inherited the baldness gene. So I started looking older sooner.
Steve
might have liked, and then COVID turned the rest of my beard white.
So why do you think I shaved my head?
There you go. There you go. It's a good look for you though, man.
I started growing it back in, and unfortunately, my Lego group employee badge has me with hair on it. Only because Beth had never seen me with hair. And she's like, "Well, that's interesting. I've never seen with hair before." And what I heard was she likes me with hair. So I just let it go and then realized, wait a minute, that's not what she said. It's going. It's got to go. It's got to go.
It's good.
And while most people can't tell, because most people don't have the viewpoint that I do, in that I'm 6'4" and most people are not high enough to see the top of my head, I can see the top of my head in the mirror, and I know it's thinning, and I don't like it. So let's zip it.
Yeah, I've got a lot of friends that have gone that route too. I just never did. And I mean, the good part of it is that if you look at pictures from me from 15 years ago, I don't look that much different than I do now. If I didn't have the white beard, I wouldn't. So, and 15 years ago, I didn't have a beard at all. But yeah, I'm afraid that if were I the Wolfman, the top of my head would reflect the moon still. But to bring it back to Monster Kids rather than...
I'm flashing back now to the original Teen Wolf movie where the dad turns into the werewolf and he's all gray.
Oh, I've done that. Yeah.
All right, so yeah, speaking of monsters and monster movies and all that, a little bit ago, you went through a list. Universal movies, Hammer movies, Dark Shadows, and Harryhausen films. Okay, it's probably not fair to say this with Dark Shadows or ask you this regarding Dark Shadows, but what was the last Harryhausen film you watched?
Oh, good question. 20 Million Miles to Earth, I think.
Okay.
So I think it was on Sven Gulli.
Okay. Hammer film.
Good question. This is without looking now. If I looked, I would probably be embarrassed. It's been longer for the Hammer films. I was just talking about watching Scars of Dracula, but I didn't actually watch it yet. It was probably Quatermass in the Pit.
Nice.
5 Million Miles to Earth. It's Quatermass in the Pit version of 5 Million Miles to Earth.
They're pretty similar. I don't think there's a lot of differences, are there?
No, I don't think there's any differences.
I don't think there is. It's just the title.
It's just the title, but I think the Blu-ray is called Quatermass in the Pit, as it should be.
Okay. All right. And then what was the most recent Universal?
I just watched something that I didn't think was a Universal film I saw the other night. But are we talking classic Universal monsters? The Monolith Monsters not too long ago, but there has to be something more recent than that. Some of these show up on Sven Gulli. Oh, it was The Thing That Couldn't Die.
Ah, there you go. I love that Sven Gulli is starting, like his library has grown.
Yes.
Which is great.
Yep. Yeah. And I'm kind of in the position now where sometimes if there's something on Sven Gulli that I have digitally, I'll actually watch it digitally and then watch his segments. So I don't get the interrupt. And in fact, now that I've said it, it wasn't The Thing That Wouldn't Die. It was, It Came From Outer Space, which I watched like a week and a half ago.
Okay.
That counts.
No, it totally counts.
And before that, it was probably The Creature from the Black Lagoon. And
he showed that, didn't he?
What?
He just did that, didn't he?
Yes. Yeah. That's why I remember it was like, it came from outer space because it just happened like a week ago. But I watched The Thing, as I said, these are comfort films, and I will go in and I will watch them. And I managed to get, they did those Universal sets that aren't the main sets. They're like the weird oddball ones. And I managed to, the one that had The Thing That Couldn't Die, which is one of my favorite kind of weirdo late Universal films, right? That was on set 6. And it was set 6, and I thought, set 6, I'll have some time to collect that. I don't need to buy that right away. But it also has Shadow of the Cat, I think it's called, which Universal distributed but Hammer made, or something like that. And suddenly, another company, it might have been Shout, licensed that film and immediately put that other set out of print. And it went from, from $40 or $50 for the set to $400, $200 to $400 for the set. I managed to get a copy of it for twice what I would have paid, but far less than I might have paid. Felt happy about it. And since I'd gotten all the other sets at a bargain price, I figured it evened out. So that was how The Thing That Couldn't Die got watched fairly recently. Because I paid all this money for this. I better watch it. Better watch these shows right now.
The Thing That Couldn't Die, that's the one with the head in the box, right?
The one with the head in the box, which is also, related to the Dark Shadows storyline from later in the series. And in Dark Shadows, I was... as I was preparing this playtest of the unofficial role-playing game, I was watching that pretty constantly. I got through the 1897 Quentin storyline and up into the Lovecraftian Leviathan storyline, which as a kid I hated.
Really?
And now I just hated it. It was so much slower and so much more boring than the 1897 stuff that I was really... A lot of people didn't like it, and I was one of them. Seeing it now, though, as a Lovecraft fan, I really like it, and I think I understand why it was probably a misstep for them. But I think the idea of having this wild and crazy 1897 storyline, and then right after that, going into a much slower, more implied horror kind of Lovecraftian thing, it makes a lot of sense to do it. even though it was immensely unpopular with the fans. And I think probably the fact that Barnabas was a villain for part of that, for a good chunk of that storyline, didn't help. And I've discovered listening to the Penny Dreadful podcast about Dark Shadows that was also happening at the same time they were making House of Dark Shadows, which I also watched fairly recently, and they were doing the show and making the movie at the same time, right? With the same people, including the same writers and the same actors.
That's crazy.
And in order to do that, they apparently started writing further ahead than they normally would have. So when that storyline kind of went off the rails for the fans, they had already had another number of weeks done of it in the writing room and couldn't come back and fix things the way they would in other elements of Dark Shadows, where it was like, oh crap, that's not working. Let's change up the storyline and kill that character and move in this direction. And they didn't have a chance to do that. But looking at it now, I'm really enjoying the Lovecraftian storyline. I think it works pretty well. I think it's pretty cool. They did a pretty good job with it, even though I hated it when I was a kid.
And do you think that's just because you've changed, your perspective's changed a little bit? You've become a little bit more wider read, maybe?
Yes. Yeah, I think it's mostly on me. But, I mean, there are elements of it that don't work so well that they really should have thought out more, but they were obviously Dark Shadows. For those that don't know Dark Shadows at all, Dark Shadows was basically like putting on a 30-minute live horror show on stage every day, because even by the point that the Leviathan storyline comes up, there are not a lot of second takes. There's not a lot of edits. It's like we're going out there, we're doing it, and it's done, and then we're doing it again tomorrow, and it's done. And that is one of the great marvels of Dark Shadows, that they were able to do this and make it so entertaining as they did for as long as they did, which I think is 1,225 shows, something like that. It's a lot. It's a lot of shows. It's a lot of shows, and I'm one of these people that bought them, bought all the individual sets rather than waiting for the coffin. So I'm on set 19 now out of 35 now or so, not counting the intro pre-Barnabas stuff. Barnabas being the vampire character, for those who really don't know anything about Dark Shadows.
I like the pre-Barnabas stuff, darn it. I will support and defend that stuff. I know
it's good.
Yeah.
It's good. And it's
I love Phoenix storyline. I really do.
The Phoenix storyline is great. And it's totally is that out of left field. It's like, how did they ever think of this? Yeah, a lot of the other stuff, even, Barnabas, you can see echoes of other things, where, vampire stories and Dracula and the Mummy and all that kind of stuff. And a lot of the stuff, you can see echoes of other things. But the Phoenix idea, maybe there was some kind of a short story in a pulp magazine or something. But in terms of stuff I'm familiar with, sure, it just seems to come out of, it's like, wow, that is just crazy.
Yeah, I mean, it is the typical Phoenix story, burning bird, rebirth, and all that. But they put this horror twist on it, which was just phenomenal. And I forget his name, but the parapsychologist they bring in, who does not survive the storyline, he has a car accident or whatever.
Oh, and I know.
He was one of my favorite little one-off, side characters. And I mean, even back then, they were doing solid characterizations. I mean, that's where I fell in love with Burke, much to Dominique's dismay. Burke's not a good guy, but I found him to be a great character nonetheless. Fascinating to watch.
Right. Yeah. No, Dark Shadows is a lot of fun. And if you know just a little bit about how they made it, it becomes even more fascinating, because then it's really like watching a Tightwire act every single day.
And you can tell, especially in earlier episodes, like before they go full color, you can really tell they're still trying to figure things out. And, oh, well, somebody just flubbed a line and they corrected themselves and now it's real obvious, but it stays in. Cut, print, move on.
Right.
Because
well, yeah, they couldn't edit because they had no ability to edit the videotape. Right. So you just had to keep going. It didn't matter what had happened.
Yep.
So yeah, no, that's
But that gives it
fascinating.
a charm. I feel like that gives it a charm.
Oh
Not
yeah,
all-
no, it's like watching live theater. It's like you don't expect live theater to be perfect every time you see it. When it comes close, that's really kind of a marvel. But you're not going to live theater expecting everyone to hit all their marks and get all the lines right. I mean, maybe if you're watching the Royal Shakespeare Company or something, but I remember the only opera I've ever seen live was in Boston at probably the Boston Opera House or something like that. And the great Beverly Sills was one of the world's best sopranos, was in this opera that my dad took me and my brother to. I think Mark, I don't think the little kids went with us. Anyway, during this opera, which was a full opera company, big production with a great star in it, they had behind the stars moving scenery that would move as they were supposedly walking across the stage, and multi-levels moving buildings behind them as they were supposedly strolling and the scenery was changing. So they had this very complicated setup for that to happen. And it was really cool. But at one point, one of the people carrying the flats that had a moving building on it fell behind the others. And so temporarily, the buildings kind of got out of whack with each other. And it was an opera buffo. It was a comedy. But it clearly wasn't planned. And it was funny, which was okay because it was a funny opera anyway. But it's just like, if a company that has that much prestige, that much time, that much power has a scenery malfunction on that level, what chance does Dark Shadows have?
So, listeners, I didn't have an agenda for this recording or conversation. We've just been kind of freestyling it here. And so none of this was planned. But you've brought up theater a couple of times now with your Uncanny Encounters, stage reading. We've talked about Dark Shadows, similarity to live theater, and you just brought up your experience with opera. This is something. I'm married to somebody who loves theater, who's directed theater and has performed in theater. And back in high school, I was a thespian myself, so, I've got a little bit of theater in me, that sort of thing. Can classic horror work theatrically these days, you think? Just something that popped into my head and something I've been thinking about lately anyway, regarding other things.
I think so, potentially. I think there's some scary moments in the stuff that Paul and I done that I think work fairly well on the stage, and I think you could certainly do it. Like a lot of stuff, it depends on how you approach it, and you have to be sincere to it. You can't put your tongue in your cheek and pull this stuff off.
See, I was going to ask you, would you play it straight or would you be serious? And another reason why this has been on my mind, and I know I just said this just popped up into my head, but it did for this conversation, but it's been on my mind for a while. In last week's episode, Matt and I talked about Attack of the Giant Leeches, and we discovered that there was a theatrical adaptation of it done for the stage.
Mm-hmm.
We do know that Monos has been adapted for the stage at least once.
Mm-hmm.
And to go back to birthday boy Chris, Chris Mim,
Mm-hmm.
Monster Phantom Lake has been adapted as a stage musical. I do wonder, and maybe Chris is kind of like an outlier because his stuff is so unique. He's not so tongue-in-cheek that he's making fun of it or belittling it. There is some humor to it because he's playing up the tropes, but it's not like a full-on Larry Blameyer experience where it's totally yucking it up. And I know Blameyer has his fans, and that's not what this is about.
No, and I love Larry too. He's a
and I'm going to say it again. I know Epic Rap Battles of History isn't really an ongoing thing anymore, but I still want to see Larry Blameyer and Christopher R. Mim in a rap battle. That's all. I just want to see. But anyway, so taking Mim out of it, Monos was done, and I think Monos was done. It's kind of like a jokey thing because most people view Monos as something to make fun of.
Right.
I don't know if Giant Leeches was done seriously or not. I know Dracula and Frankenstein have a rich history on the stage. In fact, speaking of Matt, one of his children just appeared in a children's theater version of Dracula in Oregon. And it was adapted for kids. And, instead of it being, I've crossed oceans of time to find you, whatever, blah, 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 it was Dracula and his sister really want the neighbors to be their vampire slaves. So, they kind of made it cute, and that's cool. And I love that. I'm just wondering if we could take some of this stuff, specifically stuff from like the 50s, because, man, there's some great stuff there. Could that be adapted theatrically seriously and be taken seriously?
I think so, potentially. I'm going to flash back to a couple of different performances I've seen here. Fairly recently, went down to Chicago at Paul's request because he was like really into this thing. And Kif was my wife. Kif and I saw a musical adaptation of Carrie, which was fabulous. It was really, really good. And I don't think it's one I don't know if it ever toured nationally or whatever, but it was very, it was a musical, but it was very serious and it was really, really interesting. And that wasn't that long ago. A little while before that, the theater company that I'd originally written my pieces in Candy Encounters for, one of the reasons I wrote a play was they had done for Halloween a thing that called Not What You Expected, I think was what they called it. And it started out as if it was just a bunch of roommates having a hard time doing some normal things. And then in the middle of it, it turned into a live zombie attack from all corners of the theater.
Cool. I love that.
And it was really, really cool. It was, because they weren't telling you that's what it was in any of their, and it was cool and it was scary and it wasn't quite as good as it could have been if it had been more written and less improvised, which was the reason I thought, well, I could write something. and I did. But flashing back even further than that, back to when I was first working at TSR, there was an experimental theater in Milwaukee called Theater X. And Theater X I went up there with Zeb Cook and his wife, and I think Kif was there, and maybe Steve Winter and some other people. A small contingent of TSR people that love Lovecraft. Actually, all of us love Lovecraft. But a small group of us went up to see this performance by Theater X, and my memory was that it maybe wasn't in the round, but it was in a very darkened space, and they put on a play that was based on The Haunter of the Dark and a couple of other Lovecraft stories.
That would be dope. Oh.
And it was done, it wasn't done with normal sets. It was done with theater of the imagination and kind of black staging everywhere in a very, very dark space. And there was a wall on one side of the space that looked like it was a black wall, but at a certain point or points in the story, things started to press up against that wall, and it turned out it was like rubberized or something. So suddenly there were hands or faces or things emerging from that wall just briefly, and then they would fade away. And that was actually, that's 40 years ago, but it was actually scary. It was actually a really, really super creepy experience. And at one point I'd actually found the playwright and gotten a copy of the play from him to maybe put it on this other theater that my friend was doing, but didn't happen. Anyway, that was really creepy. And I don't see any reason that you can't do creepy, serious plays. People will laugh because,
sure,
for better or worse, that has become part of the experience of horror sci-fi. People go to the movies to be scared, but I love MST3K. I know you have a very mixed relationship with it, but there's definitely too much of that in the theater going public now.
I feel like I don't know if I blame. Okay, I do blame Mystery Science Theater 3000 for some of it, because I have sat in, say, screenings at Weird Wednesday at the Joy Cinema, where there are people who think they're just as funny as Joel and the robots,
right,
and make comments for everybody else. That said, I think sometimes that involuntary laughter happens during an uncomfortable moment because we don't know how else to express that emotion.
Right, yes. And that's
sometimes
perfectly acceptable in any kind of a theatrical experience, whether it's live or it's movie projection, because you just heard me, assuming that the tape survives, you heard me laughing uncomfortably talking about all the crazy stuff that's happened, the crazy and difficult and sad stuff that's happened to me in the last 6 to 8 months, the last year of my life, right? Sure. Because, as you say, either laugh or cry, right? And at some point in the theater, you're facing that same decision. It's like you scream and then you laugh. That's very normal. So yeah, I think it can be done. I don't think there's any reason it could not be done.
At the beginning of Beth and mine's relationship, she was performing in a musical that was basically a D&D musical, which was awesome. And, I really started thinking about theater and such again, which I hadn't thought about in a long time. And I started exploring a little bit, and I am not going to pronounce his name correctly, but the comic book writer, Roberto Aguirre Sacasa?
I'm not sure.
He wrote and created the Chilling Adventures of Sabrina comic book, but then he's written a lot of...
okay, yeah, I haven't read those. I know of them, but I haven't read them. So.
He's also written a ton of other Marvel stuff and television and that sort of thing. But he started as a playwright. I mean, he has a lot of plays out there, and they're all pretty good, what I've read. There's one called The Mystery Plays, which is basically two stories, two one-act stories that have like a character that kind of links between the two. And it's kind of spooky stuff. And there's another one he's got called The Weird, which has a flat-out horror host named M.T. Grave, who comes out and introduces 6 little short stories that feel like they could have been taken from a very light version of Creepshow or something. And, I think that's kind of neat, too, that you're seeing things like that. I just wonder... Some of the movies that I've shown Beth that are in the public domain, horror movies, monster movies, I feel like would adapt well for the stage, or could be adapted well for the stage. And I just wonder if there would be an audience for something like that.
Well, judging from my own experience, it took more than 15 years to get someone. Now there was COVID. So that did screw things up too. It took more than 15 years to find a little theater company that was interested in putting on some stuff that it's not mainstream, but it's not more out there than Twilight Zone, right? That Paul and I are both great admirers of Serling, and there's Serling qualities to the stuff, right? And just finding people to put it on is really difficult. I mean, it's so hard to make a living doing anything creative right now, especially when there's so much stuff that's out there for free.
It has my entire lifetime. I don't know about you, but
right. Well, I mean, that's one of the great things about doing a lot of the stuff that I've done, whether it's D&D or Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles or even the novels, is that I managed to get into a lot of the stuff at the time where there weren't a lot of rules. where there was expansion and there was a lot of freedom and not a lot of rules. And now we're kind of, most things were the other way around. There's a lot of rules, and there's a lot of concentration on the monetization of creativity rather than just doing it because you love it. And the only reason that I've been able to do Atomic Tales with Chris is because Chris and I are both committed to doing it without making any money from it. Right. And it's hard to find people that are willing to commit even to a 2-week, or 1-week run of a play.
Sure.
Without making any money from it. And
I guess we haven't even brought up Josh Kennedy, who, has told us repeatedly and multiple times that his first love is the stage. The movies are secondary for him.
Yeah,
he's always doing stuff. I've got a DVD of a performance or a production of King Kong that he did on the stage.
Oh my God! I hadn't even...
Sorry, yeah.
Well, exactly. And the trick is you have to be committed to it and willing not to make a lot of money from it. Which is why, Chris's wife has a job, and my wife has a job, and Josh has a job, and you've got a job, and Beth's got a job, and the money often is just blind luck at this point. It's blind luck. It's right place, right time. When I was hired at TSR, they were paying us so little money that they might as well not have been paying us. I think I can't remember exactly. I think it was making maybe 25 cents an hour above minimum wage, maybe 35. And minimum wage was like $4 an hour. So it was like I was taking home maybe $200 a week or something like that. It was like, yeah, and those kind of stakes, it's a lot easier to go out there and do stuff. When there's no money on the line, but when everything has to be monetized, when an author has to tell a publishing house how you're going to help them monetize your book, that's just crazy. Don't get into this because you want to make money, because making money it takes a lot of luck and good timing.
So along those lines, check out patreon.com/monsterkidradio to help.
Right. Yeah. We're not there. We're not into this because we want to make money as Monster Kids. We're in because we love this stuff. That's why I started doing this stuff and stopped writing boy detective novels. Although actually I stopped writing boy detective novels because of corporate mergers. But that's another story entirely. And we don't need to go there. But yeah, I'm writing what I love. I'm working on what I love. Atomic Tales, Monster Shark, all the the Werewolf's Curse, all this stuff. Even if I were to be able to do a Dark Shadows role playing game officially, it would be nice if it made money. But there's no way I could go into it thinking that, because that's this is one way to surely be disappointed in your creative endeavors, and that is to think I'm doing this for the money, right?
Well, and again, we keep talking about Birthday Boy. Chris's whole goal, at least my observation from the outside, is that he wants to make enough money to do the next one, and that's about it.
Right. And he's
said money to host a streaming
podcast. His goal is to not lose money making these. And at the point it starts taking money out of his family, at the point it starts not being able to support itself, then he has to consider stopping doing it. And I totally get that. It makes perfect sense to me. Even though certainly not everything I do supports the family. But his films, he's working on the 21st one, I think.
Is he doing another one? Yeah. The vibe that I've gotten, like I said, I'm on the outside. I'm very much on the outside. But the vibe that I've gotten from all of the material that I've seen out there from him about three bad girls who find a gun and become vampires, and yes, that is the name of the movie, it feels kind of final to me. And I hope that's not the case.
It's not. He's maybe you're not getting his monthly newsletter, or I think he has a free level on his Patreon. He has a Patreon now too. He's announced the next film, and it's going to be an anthology film. It's going to have segments and be a true anthology. And I don't remember the name of it off the top of my head. Forgive me, Chris. But yeah, so he's definitely.
Leaders are listening. Come on.
I mean, all of us, even though those of us that have done this a lot, like me and Chris that have, done specific creative things a lot, we all fall prey at some point to kind of the, do I know what I'm doing? Can I do this anymore? Syndrome. And he feels, judging from conversations I've had with him, but also from just stuff he's put out on his podcast, he has that basically every time before a new film comes out. It's like, Jesus, can I do this anymore? Do I have any idea what I'm doing? All of us feel that, and it's hard to overcome that. It's hard to and to do it again and again and again and I'm old enough to retire now, according to everybody, right?
Sure.
Which just blows my mind. It's one of the youngest people ever hired into the creative division by TSR. The fact that I could be at literal retirement age just blows my mind, which brings me to the last thing at least one of the last things we should talk about, in case people are hearing this right after we record it. My brother and I are selling our Silver Age Marvel Comics collection through Heritage Auctions right now.
I wanted to get to that and kind of wrap up on that. We're going to make sure there's a link in the show notes, but to help support Steve and his brother.
And my brother, Mark. Yeah, I've three brothers, and there's two of us, and then two of us that are about 10 years younger. And Mark is the one that's closest in age to me. And we collected these comics 50 years ago. So in the comics, there's a Spider-Man #1 original series. There's a Daredevil #1. There's Spider-Man and Daredevil up through 80 on Spider-Man, and then up through 100 on Daredevil, at least, I think. And then other things in between. A lot of them are up on Heritage. Some of them are also being sold by another seller who I know personally. Heritage would only take stuff that had 15 cent or less as the cover price.
So we'll make sure there's a Heritage Auctions link in the show notes for this. This episode,
I have links on my Facebook page too. So, okay. And this is supporting my future retirement, my nest egg, whatever it ends up being. But I've spent a lifetime collecting this stuff, and now it's time to start getting rid of some of it and decluttering the house so we don't have to not to get grim again. So my children don't have to go through the kind of stuff that my younger brothers had to do with my mom's house when my mom needed to move into nursing care and then pass away eventually. So, and that having seen that process, we know that's not something you ever want to have other people doing if you can avoid it. So trying to get rid of the stuff I'm not going to read again. Unlike the many, many times I will watch the Universal horror films.
Well, you're not getting rid of it. You're letting somebody else who's going to get some enjoyment out of it.
Well, that too. Yeah, exactly. Exactly. I got 50 years of enjoyment out of Spider-Man 1, and we read every one of those. We did not collect any of this stuff for value. It turned out to be valuable. When we were buying it, there were no e-comics. There weren't a lot of reprints. We were buying things so we could read them.
You may pick up a comic that has a fingerprint from a young Steve Sullivan.
Yeah.
Well, that brings us to the end of this episode of Bride of Monster Kid Radio. Thank you for listening. Thanks for bearing with us as we just did kind of a kickback rap session with Steve. It was a lot of fun. Make sure you check out his website at sdsullivan.com. I'm going to make sure there's a link in the show notes to that website, to his Facebook page, and to his Heritage Auction site. So go check that out. See what kind of comic books he has available for you to bid on. See what he's up to on the writing front, and just follow along with everything going on with Steve. He's one of us, and we like to support our own here at Bride of Monster Kid Radio. Thanks again, Steve, for making this happen and pitching in when we needed you. Thank you, Steve. You can find these links in the show notes at monsterkidradio.net. This is where you're going to find everything you need to know about the podcast. You're going to find links to everything that we've talked about, including Steve's websites. You're also going to find our contact information, like our voicemail line, which is 360-524-2484. You can call us and leave us a voicemail and talk about anything you've heard about on this podcast, on the previous iteration of the podcast, anything Monster Kid related happening in your neck of the woods. You want to call in a little mini review? You want to just talk about something Monster Kid related? I'd love to have you call in. Or you can even email us at monsterkidradio@gmail.com. You're also going to find links to our social media outlets over at monsterkidradio.net. Go check that out and give us a follow, a like, a retweet, or share, or what is it on Blue Sky? I guess it's a repost on Blue Sky now. Whatever it is, thanks for following us online and sharing and reposting and just spreading the word about what we do here at Bride of Monster Kid Radio. We mentioned the Patreon a couple of times, patreon.com/monsterkidradio. You can even become a patron for no money. You don't have to put any money in, but do follow us over there on Patreon, because we are slowly making patreon.com/monsterkidradio our main social media outlet. And anything that we have going on regarding the show, we're going to post there first, like I did when I lined up this conversation with Steve for this week's episode of the podcast. And where I'll also be posting a schedule for the Monster Kid Movie Club, which is our Twitch channel at twitch.tv/monsterkidradio. We will be showing movies next Saturday, the 3rd. We're going to be doing a couple of things. I think we're going to be showing a movie that did come up a couple of times in this conversation. Keep your fingers and tentacles crossed that we got the okay to do that. And I've got a few other surprises in mind. Also, on May the 4th, now this is Sunday, and yeah, May the 4th is a made-up holiday, blah, 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 love Star Wars, yeah. We're going to do some Star Wars fan films on May the 4th at twitch.tv/monsterkidradio. No, I can't show the original Star Wars movies, but I want to get into the Star Wars spirit, so we'll show some Star Wars media over on the Twitch stream as well. So make sure you follow us on Twitch. Again, you can do this without paying anything. And if you do so, you will be notified every time we go live. Of course, you can always subscribe to the channel and that sort of thing too, and that helps us out. But if you want to be notified every time we go live on Twitch, well, go to twitch.tv/MonsterKidRadio. I'm excited about what the weekend is going to look like. It's going to be a lot of fun. Also, I'm excited about next week because next week puts us into May. And we have talked about doing Lucha de Mayo. I did it wrong. I keep going back and forth. I get in my head and I overthink it. Lucha de Mayo, where we talk about luchador movies in the month of May. Now, we may not do a luchador movie the first Monday of Lucha de Mayo, but we'll see. Again, stay tuned to patreon.com/MonsterKidRadio, where I'll make the announcements there first, and then that'll get trickled out to all the other social media outlets. Bride of Monster Kid Radio is a Team Death production. All original content of Bride of Monster Kid Radio is licensed under a Creative Commons Attribution, Non-Commercial, No Derivatives 4.0 Unported license. You can learn more about Team Death, our other projects like Death Designs, Mail Order Zombie, the Team Death YouTube channel, and more at www.teamdeath.com. Remember, death is spelled D-E-T-H. All previous episodes of this podcast, as well as the original Monster Kid Radio podcast, are available at www.monsterkidradio.net. Please rate and review Bride of Monster Kid Radio wherever you download your favorite podcasts. The Arouser is copyright 2025, The Arousals. You can find it on their album For the Daring and Lusty. You can find that on Bandcamp at thearousals.bandcamp.com. Make sure you go check them out and let them know that you heard about them here on Bride of Monster Kid Radio. Also, you can find The Arousals on Facebook. Just look up The Arousals. And if you happen to be in Europe, they're doing what they call an exciting series of Twang Shebang. They're going on tour. They're going to be in Italy, Denmark, France, all over the place. Check out their graphics about their upcoming shows on their Facebook page, facebook.com/thearousals. My name is Derek M. Cook. I'll talk to everybody next week when we talk about something. Ciao.